the pre-session phase when we were outside having coffee, Anuj Puri said he's very excited to hear from me about what's ailing the Indian economy. And I said, listen, in this room, India is on fire. There's no problem with the economy. So it'll look really odd if I say, India has got a few growth issues, and these are the reasons, these are the fixes, and this thing may turn around, the ship is a little grounded. It sounds a little out of sync with what all of you are experiencing. So instead, and it goes back to an accidental breakfast conversation I had with Gaurav, I don't know if he's around, but about what I get paid for. So I get paid to make forecasts. And I advise people, the fine print, which we usually don't read, is take all my forecasts with 2 hands of salt, okay? Because I go wrong very often. I think the more useful thing to do, rather than make forecasts, which I will, of course, during the course of this little chat, is to actually lay down a framework to think. Because when you're making your investments or your disinvestment decisions, because you could be making either of them or both of them, it's important to understand why you're doing this. And eventually, of course, we can all go wrong. We also go right, and hopefully we go right more often than the toss of a coin, and that's enough to succeed in business, 51%. Win ratio is good enough, you don't need 65%. But the framework is essential to making honest and useful decisions. So the framework for India is, I think, premised on 3 major foundations, which have 3 major implications. One of those implications dovetails right into your businesses. So those 3 foundations are as follows. The first one is very obvious. All of you know it, but I still make this. I make this point on television, I make this point in conferences, I make this point in one-on-one meetings. And that's, this country has a lot of people. It's the foundation to your business as well. 1.5 billion. At no point in the world history has any country had so many people, right? We know that. We overtook Chinese population and now we're the largest, and no other country has 1.5 billion people. More interestingly, we have in excess of 400 million kids. No country in the history of the world has had that many kids. And no country in the history of the world has had more than or near about 30% of its population as kids. These are all your future customers. So population lends itself to growth potential. It is not sufficient, it's necessary condition, but not sufficient. You need other factors to add up. But without population, it's hard to grow. You know, one of the secrets why America has done so well in the aftermath of COVID is that it imported a lot of people. The run rate has been about 3.1 million people per year in 21, 22, and 23. The data for 24 is yet to come. That's 9.3 million people imported, and it essentially led to about an 11 million increase in US population. By the way, faster than the net population growth of India. So America was the fastest growing population in the world in the last 3 years, which essentially meant that even though the Fed was increasing interest rates, the US did not slow down. So population is intrinsic to India's story. And of course, we add on other factors like our reasonable institutional framework, democracy which works, and then you get a story. A lot of people will say, but Africa has a lot of people. Africa has 50 countries. No single country has that many people, and Africa has an institutional challenge. It doesn't have the institutional setup, and it's not easy to get this institutional setup. It's very challenging. So that's the first thing. The second thing, which is, I think, less understood, less appreciated, is there is dramatic social change happening in India. It's a social change that is unprecedented in this country's history. What is that change? Well, that change is that infant mortality has crashed. So fewer kids are dying before turning 5. As a consequence, fertility rate has gone down. So India's fertility rate, as measured by the National Health Survey, and we have data up till 2022, is now below its replacement rate, which means it's at 2 instead of 2.1, which is the replacement rate. This has great implications on your business. So population has significance, declining fertility rate has even bigger significance. Why? Because when the fertility rate is declining, it means you are producing fewer kids. When you're producing fewer kids, it means you are spending less money in growing your kids. So you have more money to do other things, which is take vacations. Kids are a huge burden on society. They prevent you from free time. They prevent you from going on vacations. They can be very expensive. The other consequence of this, and this is, I think, where India's growth story really takes off, is that the female participation in the workforce is rising. And this is a big change for India. It wasn't happening until now because in most part, the females were locked up in their houses taking care of the kids. Now, if you have fewer kids, it means you can get liberated from that environment and you can join the workforce. So we've had a 6 percentage point increase in female participation in the workforce over the last 3 years, up from 27 to 33. This 33, I think, is heading into 50% zone, which essentially means the entire country gets richer. It was in the 1960s that the female in the US got liberated. And it was because of 4 things. In hindsight, we know this. At the time, it was not so obvious. The refrigerator was invented. By the way, none of these 4 things were created by America. They all came from outside. The refrigerator came, the microwave oven came, and the washing machine came. But most importantly, Japan invented the pill, which controlled birth. And suddenly, enrollment of females into US universities soared because you don't need to be at home washing clothes, cooking food. You could store it, you could heat it, and you could control birth. So India is somewhat in a similar situation, which is this mega social change that is underway. The third important anchor to this is what we have done to our economy. I phrase this as macro stability. No longer is India slave to what's happening outside. If you recall in 1992, or you recall in 2008, or you recall in 2013, events in the outside world had catastrophic impact. I think most people in this room will remember '08 and they will remember 2013, but they may not know what happened in '92, so I will briefly digress. So on August 1st, 1990, Saddam Hussein, in his wisdom, decided to attack Kuwait. That was in the evening of 1st, and on 2nd August, he attacked Kuwait. It's a date that is imprinted in my head because it changed my future. I was still coming out of college, and if Saddam Hussein had not done that, I would not be standing here. I'm heavily indebted to him. I keep telling on a lighter note that people in this country should have Saddam Hussein on their walls. Because he attacked Kuwait and oil prices doubled in a matter of 15 days. Now, India's finances were already precarious, coming out of a coalition government, mismanaged finances. And the doubling of oil prices was something we could not absorb. And we collapsed. And we went into a financial crisis. And then in 1991, we had a new government, and the IMF put a gun on our head and said, do all this, I'll give you $200 million. $200 million, Puneet. That's it, $200 million. That's what the IMF was giving us. And they made us change everything about the country. It was a seminal moment. So gone are those days when outside events are triggering reactions in this country's economy. The latest example being the Fed raising rates at its fastest clip in 45 years, and India emerged unscathed. Why did that happen? Because of macro stability. What is this macro stability? It is essentially a country whose economic policy is intrinsically focused on controlling inflation, but more importantly, driving down the volatility of inflation. What does that do? When inflation walls go down, interest rate volatility goes down. When interest rate volatility goes down, growth volatility goes down. Put another way, predictability of growth goes up. And for all of you decision makers here, it's sweet music when I tell you that, more or less we will do this growth, because that anchors your investment decisions. That's what's happened in India over the last few years. Our predictable growth the predictability of our growth has improved. The other thing that has happened is our dependence on imported energy has crashed as a consequence of multiple actions. FASTag, our highways are faster, cars are faster, GST, which means that we don't have these border controls. So trucks are not stopping at state borders for 12 hours to pay their taxes. So all of this has led to a major decline in oil consumption. Oil consumption, by the way, as a percentage or as a factor of GDP, has halved in the last 5 years. So oil prices are not creating a problem. So multiple of reasons which has created macro stability, more predictable growth, more predictable interest rates. And these are the three foundations. So I'll recap them: population, social change, and macro stability. The implications are very deep. Again, as I already alluded to, go straight into your businesses. The first thing is that this country's consumption is set to zoom. Now, recall that India is already a consumer-driven economy, and at the end of this speech, I will talk a little bit about India-China and bring that into context here. We are doing more in the coming years, and now here I'm going to make a forecast. So you look at India's income pyramid, we have a lot of people who are at the bottom, very poor people. I estimate that nearly 200 million people slept last night without getting a meal. That's how poor we are. Worse than Sub-Sahara Africa. So that's the bottom of the pyramid. It's shrinking. It's shrinking rapidly, but it's still pretty thick. At the top, at the very top, we have 5 million households that are rich. Rich by global standards, rich by Western standards. All of you included in that 5 million. These people can buy Louis Vuitton purses, drive BMW cars, buy penthouses in expensive real estate. All of Anuj Puri's clients, they're all sitting up there. And that's the contrast. And in the middle, we have all these middle-class people who are aspiring to get to the top and form part of your customer base as well. The 5 million, of course, are your most treasured customers. They're buying all the top hotel rooms in this country. The next layer, which is about 70 million, is also 70 million households. I'm giving household numbers here, not number of people, is also a very important cohort. Now, what's happening in the next 10 years, India's per capita income is likely more than doubling. As we paid homage to Ratan Tata, one of the famous things that he had said about 10 years ago, when India's economy was kind of in doldrums, is that there's nothing to celebrate about 5% growth in India, because you wake up next morning, India has done 5%. So 5% is no reason to celebrate. And that's the thing, India will do 5% growth. The key is whether it can do 8, can it do 7.5, can it do 8? 9 looks a little too rich. But if it does 7, we will more than double our per capita income. The consequence is that out of those 70 million households that are middle income today, 20 will go to the top of the pyramid. We're going to quintuple the number of rich people in this country from 5 to 25. Nowhere in the world is this going to happen. It has not happened in the history of the world that a country has generated 20 million new rich households. Not even in China's peak did this happen. So this is unique in world history. These are all your customers. They're your luxury customers. They're going to buy luxury room space like no other place on the planet. They're of course going to buy luxury cars. They're going to buy luxury wallets. They're going to buy maybe a lot of vacations abroad as well. So for those who have businesses abroad, You're going to benefit from a lot of inflow of Indian customers. This 70 million is also going to grow to 170. So don't underestimate what's happening to the middle class. And again, in the context, for those who are aware, that's where India has not really created adequate supply of rooms. That's, I think, an opportunity that is begging attention. And then, of course, the bottom will shrink. So there's a huge consumption boom that is going to be underway in India. The second implication is this will be accompanied by a lot of lending or a borrowing from a customer's perspective, lending from a bank's perspective. So consumers in India are going to borrow money. They're going to spend their future like the Americans have done, Europeans have done over the last 40 years. It will end very badly, but none of us will be alive to see that. So it'll be after our lifetimes, but for the next 40, 50 years, and I may be being a little presumptuous here, but I think most of this room will not be there in 50 years. I think it'll end badly, but in the meantime, what is borrowing? Borrowing means spending your future. So India is set to spend its future, which is going to be a pretty good future. So it's spending a very good future, and therefore it's going to make the present even better. And the third implication is a little less concerned with this room, but I think we are on the throes of a major energy boom. Energy consumption in this country is very low. It's about 850 watts per person per day. That number is 9,000 in America. By the way, 9,000 is a very interesting number. You take the largest primate on the planet, the male elephant in Africa, take 6 of them, and that's the amount of energy they consume in a day. So, I'll put another way, take a 30-ton primate, which we don't have in physical reality, and that's what a 30-ton primate would consume. So I don't know what a 70-kilogram or 80-kilogram human being is doing consuming so much energy, but because it's there everywhere. Lights, air conditioning, heating, escalators, cars, elevators, everything consumes energy. We've not even touched the tip of the iceberg in this country. So it's going to lead to an energy boom, and that has multiple implications on other things. So in summary, I think we're sitting at a very interesting moment in history. We have got some very favorable factors to drive this country. We can only bungle it from here. I think the upside is very clearly visible, and there is huge positive implication for your industry, whether it's the fact that we have so many kids who are going to become adults in the next 20, 30 years, the fact that we're going to get this major shift in the income pyramid with quintupling of the ultra-rich and a major increase in the middle class. I think it goes without saying that you will always feel underinvested because the demand for your product and your service will probably stay a touch ahead of the supply. Of course, a cycle will come. It always comes in our industry. And we've just moved to a new office in Worli, Altimus building, which is a gorgeous building. I stand at the southern end of that building, and I look at the real estate that is getting created there. The BDD chawls are being removed, and massive new construction that's underway. I can see the next bear market. In 5 years, all these buildings will be up and ready, and that will be the next bear market. So it will come. There will be a cycle. Of course, hotels is a cyclical industry. If you have not experienced the cycle in the last 5 years, you have to keep pinching yourself because it will come. But I think structurally speaking, I think we are on a very good wicket. Now, as I said, I will just bring to the table a few numbers, which I think most of you will know, but I think they still need to be brought to this discussion. So the first thing is that the comparison between India and China. Now, I hate to do this because I think China is a different country, and this comparison that we make with India is misplaced. India is not the next China, far from it. It is different. One very good example, yesterday there was a debate going on in one of the groups that I'm a member about India's services sector, that we've been body shopping, and one of the group members who happens to be a doyen from the Indian IT sector took exception to that. And my point was that last month, and I'll touch upon this in my session with Puneet. Last month, India's services exports exceeded its goods exports. And again, no country on the planet has ever done that. No country has managed to export more services than goods. It's damn hard to do it. I challenge China to build the next Infosys or TCS. They won't do it in 30 years. So let us not underestimate India, and India is different from China. But in the hotel industry, we can still draw some comparisons. And I'm going to borrow a sheet of paper here. Normally, I don't have paper, but this is not my strength, the hotel industry. So we have, as of now, about 71,000 luxury and upscale rooms. And that's about 1/10 of China. The economy rooms are, in fact, just 55,000, which is 2% of China. So the fact is that we are way behind China. Now, just to give you a context here, China's economy is about 5 times bigger than India. Chinese economy is constructed differently. Only 40% of China's economy is consumption. 60% of India's economy is consumption. So if you look at it from that perspective, Chinese consumption is just about 3 times more than India. Yet, luxury rooms 1/10 and economy rooms 1/50th. So clearly, we're short of capacity. And with that, let me conclude my address. And I will address Anuj's question separately outside because it's not befitting of this room that I talk about a slowdown. Thank you very much.